Good evening, Sunday evening, and as usual, I'd like to go through the week that just went by and give you a little preview of what's coming up in the material and the discussion for this week. And forgive my rather informal attire here, but as you can see, I'm fresh back from a whole weekend of actually being on campus at various athletic events. This was the occasion of the first post-university football home game in the program's short history, our new field that we're very proud of, and was also there with the soccer team this afternoon. For those of you who may not know it, out of the 800 or so on-campus students at Post, roughly 30% of them or a little more are student athletes. So the athletic department plays a very vital role in the life of the university. And I'm very pleased to be part of that as well as a part of the faculty. So occasionally if you see me on Sunday night wearing my coach's attire rather than something more business casual or actually almost business-like, that's the reason. Okay, on to the real stuff in our Baldrige course. Last week's discussion I was rather sure would bring up some very interesting topics and interesting points, and it certainly has. The word leadership is one that is maybe a little bit overused in the literature these days, but it is a very, very important concept, as I don't think I have to say that strongly enough. And the question this week was designed and certainly seemed to function in a way to get you to talk about leadership and how you felt about it. The very first point of the Baldrige Principles is visionary leadership. And as we, I think, are beginning to see, very hard for people to lead an organization from the bottom up. But even harder, perhaps, if you don't have that key word, visionary, in operation. What does visionary mean? And what I hope some of you will now do is look back to a week or two ago when we talked about strategy and strategic thinking. That begins with visionary thinking and then translates into visionary leadership, be able to bring that throughout the organization. I think many of us are beginning to understand how the whole Baldrige process is not just a quality system, it's a cultural way of doing business. It is a culture. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's made up of some very powerful forces. And I'm going to be spending much more time over the next couple of days really reading your discussions in depth, but I thought they were very good. And people have a lot of opinions. Leadership is a strong, it's almost emotional in its connotations. Can somebody be a good manager and not be a good leader? Can you be a good manager without being a good leader? Are good leaders always great managers? All these kind of questions come into play. But just remember, Baldrige is a holistic system, and as we go through it and look at it, you will see that opening concept of visionary leadership, how it drives everything. This week we're going to be moving into one of the other core principles of Baldrige, and very critical, and I think you'll see how it's tied to leadership. And here we start to talk about customer-centered excellence. One of the things that Baldrige really requires is that the business, the organization, the individual hear what they call the voice of the customer. How is that involved in what you do and how you do it? And what we've included in the reading this week, and it's a little bit more detailed and a little bit more ponderous, but are a couple of views from both some websites and some articles and some differing opinions on different systems, but all revolving around the customer. And also we're bringing in the concept of the stakeholder versus the stockholder. And I'm not really going to prejudice the reading. I want you to do it and figure it out and then go into the discussion and let's talk about that. Who are your stakeholders, and what has that got to do with running a quality operation or developing a culture of quality? So it's something very, very important, I think, but I think we'll all have some differing opinions on it again. You know, one of the things I want to come back to over and over again is the beauty of the Baldrige principles is that they are not prescriptive. They are sort of like guardrails, they keep us along the path to doing what we need to do. But they don't tell us exactly what to do they? They let us figure it out for ourselves. And we all know, I think, when you figure out something for yourself, when it becomes your idea and your ways of doing things, that's when things become a lot better than if somebody tells you what to do. Or, gee, this worked for me, you ought to do it too. Well, gee, this worked for me, maybe you ought to try something similar that works for you. I'll probably get into it later, but that's why one of the terms I'm starting to quarrel with, that you see businesses use all the time now, is this whole idea of best practices. Well, on the surface, that's a statement that seems to make sense. We all should use the best practices, but the best practices for us and for our organizations. What's best for you may not be best for me. So I'm starting to look at it as, instead of best practices, really, 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 really good practices, okay, that work for somebody else, worth trying, worth tweaking, worth developing for our organizations and for ourselves as individuals, but let's find what works for us. And that's really what the Baldrige process encourages us. And one of the ways it encourages us to dig deeper and find out what will be best for us is to find out and listen to the voice of our customers. So that's what I really want to look at this week. Start thinking about it. Who are your customers? Customers can take on many different meanings. Who are your stakeholders? Are we listening to their voices? Are we understanding what their needs are? Are we actually providing a service or just putting something out there, a menu of things to choose from? There are many things to go through this week. The reading gets a little deeper, the discussion gets a little deeper, and I think we're going to have some very good results. We're closing in on the halfway point. You'll notice there is another writing exercise for you to do. I will probably talk about that more later in the week. Try to be a little bit more timely, if at all possible, with the discussion grading. I just again want to thank everybody for your participation. Remember, if you can get in, or the earlier the better, because as you can well see, a lot of your learning is taking place right there in the discussion board. And if you wait to the end, you're missing out, and we really don't want that to happen. I really want to thank, at this, as we approach the halfway point, we're not there yet, but by the end of the week we will be, really want to thank you for your participation, how you've all been so active, and believe me, this is a very important point in the life of the course. You'll notice I haven't even let the next 4 weeks appear yet, because it was very important to us as we developed this course to understand just where everybody was at, where they were coming from, how they would accept it, how things would go. And you guys have done an outstanding job as the first class through, and really want to thank you for all your contributions. Keep up your efforts. You're really helping us build this as we build this program and build this course as it goes through for future generations of students at the Malcolm Baldrige School. Okay, thank you very much, and I will be in contact with everyone later this week.